Hello, everybody, and welcome back on this snowy afternoon in New Jersey. My name is John Caniglio, and I am the president of the Dover Education Association. I'm here today with our first vice president, Kathy Paderak, also of Dover as well. And today we are going to take a look at what was mentioned this past week in the Democratic and Republican gubernatorial debates regarding pensions. So there's obviously a lot of issues that us as New Jerseyans need to look at in regard to who's going to be our next governor and things like that. But for today's purposes, we are just focusing on one particular topic, and that is pensions. So both sides did mention pensions in their debate. So we will look at what they said today. We'll fact check them a little bit. We'll give you a little bit of history on pensions, what they are, how we got here, all the things about pensions. So sit back, relax for about 10 minutes or so. Here we go. First up, we have how much have we paid as employees into the pension system? So this is a little bit about the employee contribution of salary to pension. And as you see, if you look at the chart here on the screen, in 1998, we started at 5%, and it's kind of fluctuated. And Kathy will talk a little bit more about what the pension is. And for those of you that are new to teaching or you're not sure what a pension is, she'll tell you a little bit briefly about that and how we got to these numbers. So Kathy, take it away.
So it's important to understand the difference between what a pension is and something, for instance, like a 401k or a 403b, right? A pension is a defined benefit plan so that we are putting in this money, we put our contribution, the state puts their contribution, and when you retire, you are guaranteed X number of dollars per month as your defined benefits. That's a little bit different from something like a 401k where it's a more defined contribution. You put in some money, maybe your employer matches, or even a 403b, but your money is subject to the whims of the stock market, right? And how that fund does, how this fund does. So you don't really know when you're ready to retire kind of where you're going to stand. So that's a big difference, right? So one of the tenets of the pension, particularly in New Jersey as teachers, was always that, yes, teachers were not making millions of dollars a year, so that we took a salary that was fair. What they said was fair, with the idea that when you retire, you know you're going to have a secure retirement, and this is going to be what you're going to get out of it. The state does not fully fund your pension in a number of ways, meaning that they don't just pay for you to have a pension. We're putting in money too. And you can see on this chart that in 1998 and 99, we were putting in 5%, it goes down. But look at where we are since 2018. We are putting in, you're putting in, if you're a teacher in New Jersey, and it's mandatory, it's not optional, mandatory 7.5% of your salary goes toward your pension. Those are important things to understand about kind of the basics of how the pension system and contributions work.
Right. And Kathy, I noticed too on this chart between 2010 and 2011, the percentage went up one full percentage point, and then it continued to grow thereafter for the next 7 years. Can you just talk a little bit about why that happened?
Sure, because we elected Governor Chris Christie, who brought in Chapter 78, and part of the mandate, there were lots of negative impacts of Chapter 78, but part of the negative impact of his administration was that we would have to start funding more toward our pension. And so you can see that every year during his administration, we were we were forced to pay, an additional percentage until we got to the 7.5, which was the desired outcome from the beginning.
Thank you, Kathy. So now, seeing what the employees have paid over the last 20 years or so, now we're going to take a look at what the state has paid, the contributions by year. And what the state is supposed to do, like Kathy mentioned, is fully fund the pension each year. And what you're about to see is a chart that I went through numbers and years, and it was a little difficult to find, but I did put together this chart right here, which is going to show you the annual required contribution, which is the ARC on the left for each year. then the actual contribution in the middle of the screen, then the percentage that the state paid in the third column, and then the governor who was the governor at the time. So as you can see, from 2001 to 2004, the state paid zero towards the pension. Not one penny went towards the pension fund. Then the next couple of years, 9%, 13%, 56%, 48%, and then 4.5, and then zero again and zero again. So in 2011, which is what Kathy just explained to us, right, we had Governor Christie come in, tried to do some Chapter 78 reform, claimed that it would have no impact on our pension. We would be fine. All we had to do is pay a little bit of health insurance to help the state make their payments. And it ended up being a disaster. Chapter 78 caused our members to lose money, which those of you that were around for it, you're well aware of that. It's no new news. But if you look at the bottom of the chart, you'll see that Governor Murphy has paid the last 4 years 100% or more of his annual required contribution. So now we're going to go back to the video from 2010, just so you have an idea of what we were discussing earlier from Governor Christie, and here it is.
All right, we are back here in America's Newsroom, and I'm with Republican Governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. So I set this up before we went to the break. Give everybody this example, because all across the country, people are dealing with the cost of pension of government workers and state workers. So if a 49-year-old man, not an old man, okay, by all of our standards in this room probably, retires after 25 years of service, he's a state worker. He's put in $124,000 into his pension. What's he going to get back in a lifetime over New Jersey?
He gets $3.3 million in pension benefits, $500,000 in health benefits.
3.3 million on a $124,000 investment.
Total of 3.8 million.
People don't believe that number. They go, that's impossible. Where's he getting that number?
That's why we're broke. That's why we're broke, because we can no longer afford to sustain this system. And so as a result, what we're trying to do is ask for minor modifications to it.
So as you saw, and as Kathy has discussed, minor modifications, they were not so minor, and they crippled our profession. And both sides of the aisle are responsible for not putting into the pension system. It's not just Republicans, it's not just Democrats, but both were kind of responsible for that. But it was definitely more than a minor change. It was a major, major, major change.
To say the least.
1.5% of your health benefits, 1.5% of your salary, not even of the premium, Martha, of your salary. These are small things that will mean a lot in terms of helping the budget deficit. And we have gotten an absolute refusal from the state teachers union. And I will tell you, I don't believe this is a teacher problem. I think most teachers absolutely understand they want to be part of the sacrifice.
We have so many great.
Now, it was a little bit difficult to hear his last sentence there, but if you were listening, you heard him say that he believes that teachers are on board with this and that they want to be part of the sacrifice, which is very insulting, if we're being honest. There are millions of ways to make a budget fiscally responsible, and attacking teachers, as he referred to them here, as just one section of the budget is really something that I don't know if any teacher would say, like, I'll sacrifice that for New Jersey. I'll sacrifice my livelihood, my career, my family, the food I put on the table for New Jersey. And Chris Christie, or any governor for that matter, doesn't speak for the teachers. We speak for ourselves.
Teachers in New Jersey, and you've come across them, and I've come across them in my own education in New Jersey throughout my whole life. So, but they need to have somebody at the top, perhaps, who's saying, look, this is what we're going to have to do. And I gave you an example of a teacher I met who'd been working in the system for 35 years. And she said, you can't touch my pension. I built my whole life on this financial understanding that this was what I was going to get, So you're saying nothing will change in her package.
It doesn't touch her pension.
So, Kathy, what did we just say in the previous couple slides about the pension? Did anybody touch the pension?
Yeah.
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 And we're currently in a situation where we're trying to shorten the tiers of the pension system that was introduced by Chris Christie here, where people that are currently in tier 5 can retire till they're 65 years old. They have to work 35 years. And their benefits are not the same as other people. So yeah, it was definitely changed. And this has created a major issue. And this is all the way back in 2010.
And if there's any question why we're facing a teacher shortage here, you can start looking right here. It's got a lot to do with it.
Correct.
What it says, though, is should you have to pay a small percentage of that pension towards your health benefits and retirement? I think the answer should be yes. And I think most New Jerseyans would say the same thing.
Right.
This year, Martha, $823 million in retiree health benefits. That's what it's cost the state just for retiree teacher health benefits. This is crazy, and we can't afford it anymore. And listen, I don't like doing this, and it is very difficult work to have to do. But in the end, we have to put our state back in sound fiscal condition. And the only way to do that is to cut spending, not to raise taxes.
Okay. So you heard that. He did mention 1.5% of our salary or of the premium would be used to pay for health benefits because historically, before that time, the benefits were covered. We paid zero. And the 1.5% was true for 1 year. And then after that 1 year, we were phased into the 4-year chart where we paid up to 35% for health benefits if you were at the top of the guide, top of the chart. So as he claims it's a minor thing and we're only paying 1.5% to fix New Jersey, it ended up being an unintended consequence where teachers were making less money each year after year after year. And it really crippled, like Kathy said, our profession.
And what he says here is interesting because he says we have to do this, this, and this to get the state back fiscally sound. But he says but he's saying what he's actually saying is we need teachers to do this to bring the state back to be fiscally sound. He's putting it off on one singular group of people, which I think when we get a little bit further into the next section here, you're going to see that kind of continues that mindset.
Right. And so to bring it back now to 2025, we're going to hear from each candidate from the Republican Party that's running for governor and from the Democratic Party, and you're going to just listen to what they have to say in terms of pension now, knowing the background and knowing the history of it and how the state hasn't met their contribution, but every, state employee has. And as you're listening to this, listen to the words that are used. Sometimes teachers are excluded. It's just cops and firemen. Sometimes COLA is not included for teachers. Sometimes the candidates don't say that they're going to fully fund it, but that we should give the pension. So I'm just going to let the clip roll and I'm going to let you listen to it. This first part is for the Republican primary, which was on February 4th, as you see in the corner. And here we go.
One of the biggest expenditures from the state budget is on funding the state pension system. And I wanted to ask the four candidates here, all of the Democrats essentially committed that they would continue to fund the state, fully fund the state pension system, despite the fact that it is such a drain on the budget. Will you four also commit to that, or do you think that needs to be reconsidered?
No, it absolutely needs to be reconsidered. It's a $7 billion drain, and we have a roadmap. It's called Act 10. It was passed in Wisconsin. We go back 14 years. Governor Scott Walker was able to lead the charge to take a $3.6 billion deficit, turn it into a $900 million surplus, and by the way, teachers got an increase in pay. It's a huge drain. We need to draw the line. We need to talk about 403B plans. We need to make sure that our teachers who are in the system at a point where they're nearing retirement are made whole. But as far as the entire system, teachers and state workers, but I'll tell you this, we're going to separate out the cops and firefighters because I fully support a cost of living adjustment for our hero first responders.
Okay, educators, you didn't hear your name in that last part because you're not going to be included in that last part if this man is elected governor. Simple as that. And we'll get to Act 10 in a little bit. We'll explain what that is and what he meant by that. But the reason why the pension payment is currently $7.2 billion is because it was neglected for so long. It should only be $600 million, roughly. But because it was neglected, now we have these exorbitant amounts that we need to pay to make up for the loss that should have been paid decades ago.
We have to. Bottom line is this, Joey. Anybody who's earned a pension will be paid their pension. That promise has to be fulfilled. If you've earned a pension, you've got to be paid a pension. And I too support a COLA increase for our cops, particularly if we set the right criteria. I'm not talking about, nor are the cops, someone that retired yesterday. But if somebody retired more than X number of years ago, is above a certain age, and their pension is below a certain amount, based on what inflation has done to their purchasing power, they need to have their COLA. And what a lot of people don't realize is our law enforcement community does not get Social Security. Their only source of income in retirement is their pension. So let's come up with a criteria that we can all agree on and reestablish the COLA. But anybody who's earned a pension.
New law that opens.
The federal government, that the law requires us, when people are in the pension for a certain period of time, to get their pension. Those are promises that legislatures and governors have made for years. I commit to fulfill that promise. Now, new people in the system, we should seriously consider alternatives to our present pension system. But to stand up here and say you're not going to fulfill a commitment to teachers and law enforcement, I think is the wrong policy. And let's be 100% clear. I am a co-sponsor of that COLA legislation because we told police and fire years ago, when money became available, we were going to reenact COLA. We haven't done it, and that is a real mistake.
Okay, now, Kathy, before we get to the last speaker here, each person has mentioned COLA. Can you just briefly, we're going to get to it a little bit later, but could you just briefly explain what that is?
Sure. The idea of COLA is called cost of living adjustment. And as prices and rise and the cost to live and run a home and a family goes up, teachers and other people who get pensions used to get an adjustment to what their pension amount was based on that it cost more to live. That went away with Chapter 78 and when the Christie administration, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it would take to get that back, but it's not looking too promising, to say the least.
Joey, absolutely, we should honor the commitments we made to the men and women who earn those pensions. But as John said, yes, we have to consider the new hires and we have to come up with another format. And as far as COLA goes, for all the men and women out there who are seeking the COLA, understand that this has been an issue and you've had a Democrat-controlled legislator who could have passed it at any time and has refused to. So remember that when you're going to the ballot box, because it's the Democrats who refuse to pass COLA, not the Republicans.
Okay, so just hearing that and hearing many of them, maybe all four of them, say that there should be a new pension system or we have to look at another way to do it. That would be similar to if I borrowed money from somebody and I kept borrowing, and then I just paid some back at the end and I said, you know what, forget that money that I borrowed, let's do something else. And I shouldn't be left off the hook for that money because I was supposed to pay that money. So what is happening here is a lot of governors did not pay their fair share. A lot of time went by, and now all of a sudden we want to change the system. But what about all that money that was owed? What's going to happen with that? So that's the issue with creating this new system where you're not making up for lost time. Okay, so now Act 10. Bill Spadia mentioned Act 10. What is that? So Act 10 was a law that was passed in 2011 that limited the rights of public sector employees in Wisconsin. So this is what he said. This is the roadmap that we should follow, Scott Walker and everything. The law was controversial and sparked protests at the Wisconsin state capitol. What did Act 10 do? It limited the ability of public sector unions to negotiate over issues other than raises. It capped raises at the rate of inflation. It required public sector unions to hold annual elections. It eliminated fair share agreements for general municipal employees. It allowed fair share agreements for public safety employees. And a Dane County judge struck down major parts of Act 10, ruling that it was unconstitutional. So this is not exactly an idea that's wonderful and a great model to follow if it had so many issues, and they are looking actually to remove it now in 2025. He also mentioned that teacher salaries went up. And in this second little piece here, it says union members were also required to pay more for their benefits, which reduced their take-home pay and effectively served as a pay cut. So again, sacrificing teachers for the good of everyone else. So now we're going to hear from the Democratic side, and because there are 6 of them, this is a little bit longer, but again, we're going to let it play through so you can listen to what each candidate had to say regarding pensions.
funding state pensions. So this is going to be the kind of question you all love, which is the pledge. There's three camps. You're either, yes, I will pledge to fully fund the state pension. No, I will not. Or third is I'm undecided. So why don't we just quickly go down the line?
I'm proud that I was the sponsor of the bill that got the funding to fully funding. Prior to us changing the law, the state of New Jersey over the previous 20 years spent $3 billion over 20 years to fund the pension. Since we changed the law, $50 billion up to today. I'm pretty proud of that accomplishment.
I would say yes. And I think we should have a 3-year forecasting with the legislative branch and executive branch, making sure we solve for the pension, school funding, and property tax relief, that we build everything around that and bring an outside party in to sit with us and figure out how to get this done. I walked in the city hall with a $93 million deficit. Workers were being laid off, being furloughed 1 day a week, every day. All of the city buildings were sold. We fixed that problem, right? We went up twice in rating in Moody's. Ever since that time, we've been giving workers raises. In fact, the lowest paid worker in the city of Newark is above $40,000 a year. We fixed the budget in the city, and we took care of the least of those at the same time. So yes, we fund the pension. Yes, we fixed the budget, and we stopped taking money from special interests that are trying to make us do the otherwise.
Yes, and I would expand that. In New Jersey, there's one municipality that has its own pension system and is also part of the state pension, and that's Jersey City. I have a track record of funding the pension every single year because we prioritized it. I think once you get to Trenton, you need to be honest about the fact that there's a revenue conversation that needs to happen as well. You need to revisit tax brackets. You need to revisit what a millionaire's tax is versus the people that make 2 million and 5 million. A millionaire from 20 years ago is not the same as a millionaire today. You need to reconsider the tax rollbacks that Governor Christie put in place. You need to do that right out of the gate when you have political capital, because the revenue conversation is crucial to funding the pension. And you got to be honest with the residents that this is how you're going to make New Jersey sustainable.
Yeah. We absolutely have to fully fund the pension, right? And I think we're in some of the challenging situations that we are today because so many folks have gone away from that, despite what they've said when they were coming in. We see that the challenges right now of us paying a $7.2 billion payment for something that's actually costing us about $600 million a year is because folks never lived up to their obligation. And it always greatly frustrates me going, my God, think about what we could all be doing with those dollars if people had lived up to those commitments and obligations at the time. And this is the world that we live in now. And it's certainly on us to make sure we're not kicking the can down the road. But I have to say this, as somebody who's been a mayor of a town that's reduced our debt by over $60 million, has a AAA bond rating, and making sure we've reinvested those dollars into our community to help provide the supports that our residents and our businesses need. That's the kind of creative spaces that we're going to have to be in when we look at a budget that, despite the hope that the federal government comes in and gives us more money, we're going to have to be working in situations where we are able to creatively find and combine the dollars that we have on projects to get more out of the dollars that we do have.
Well, this is why I brought up Governor Murphy's fully funding the pension as one of the things I really agree with, because we know that for years other governors kicked the can down the road. So that has left us paying over $7 billion a year for our pension system, which with right next door, New York, only paying $1.5 billion for a far larger pension system. We saw in the last administration, our credit rating dropped 11 times. It's already been going up several times. That's the cost of borrowing. That's investment in our schools and our colleges and universities. So we have got to figure out a path toward continuing to fund the pension system, or we're mortgaging our kids' future. And I think we all know what a Republican governor would look like in this instance. And once again, really mortgaging our kids' future on the backs of the workers.
We have to make our pension obligations as key to our economy. And if you don't, it ends up costing everybody in the state a lot more. It's why in my tax cut plan, we pay our pensions. And on top of that, noting that we have the highest property tax in the country, we offer a property tax cut and a middle-class income tax cut. Why? Because overall, we've got to make Jersey more affordable for everyone. We've got to make sure people can afford to live here and retire here and come here. And making those pension payments is key to that.
Okay, so you heard from all 6 of them, and it was a little lengthy, but wanted to make sure that you heard from everybody and what they had to say. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about COLA, as we referenced earlier, just so everybody is aware of what that is and how we got here. So Kathy's going to take that on.
Okay, so COLA, as I said, is a cost of living adjustment. And so we'll take a look at this language here. So what happens under Chapter 78 when the Christie administration came in and this law was passed? The COLAs to pension benefits were suspended for all the current people who were retired at that time and any future retirees of all the retirement systems. There were, and there still are no further COLA increases granted for the foreseeable future. And the new law while the new law does not reduce COLA increases that were made in prior years, they didn't take anything away from years before, but no one starting on date X was getting a COLA increase, and remains in place today. Chapter 78 provides for the establishment of a pension committee that can consider reinstating the COLA when, and this is important, when the retirement system reaches a quote target funded ratio established by the law. Here's your target funded ratio. The pension system, as it is in place now, needs to be funded at 80% to reinstate COLA. While we have made progress, we are only at 52.4%. We are not even close to 80%. There is no way that COLA is coming back for years and years, probably into the 2040s. Is it better? It certainly is better. When I started teaching, or when I was earlier in my career, I sit on the NJEA Pension Policy Committee. At that time, about 10 years ago, when I was put on that committee, our pension was funded at about 41%. 52% is definitely better than 41%. 52.4% is nowhere near where we need to be. COLA will not be back for a long time.
Right. And it's still important to remember that we have made significant payments in the last 6 years or so, and we're still in this situation. We're better, much better. As a matter of fact, years ago, they were saying that the pension would dry up, right? By 2029, was it, Kathy, right?
I think it was 2027, actually.
Yeah, and that's, that if we didn't make these adjustments or make these payments, all of those monies that we made in our payments to our pension that come out of our checks, forget it. So it's definitely a move in the right direction that we no longer live in that world, but there's definitely areas for improvement. Now, our final slide, elections matter, as you can see. On June 10th, there will be the New Jersey primary for the governor's seat, okay? Now, one thing that I have seen repeatedly on social media is that Sean Spiller's campaign is paid for by the dues of the members, and members don't want their dues money being spent for a campaign and yada, yada, yada. Sean Spiller's campaign is not funded by member dues. It is funded by optional PAC donations. PAC stands for Political Action Committee. Dues are not allowed to be used for political purposes. Okay, so just anybody that mentions that or comments on that online, that is not the case. Dues are not used for political reasons. Okay, we need to elect a governor who takes care of our pensions and sees our profession as a priority, not as a sacrifice, as you heard in the Christie video earlier. We do have an opportunity, as you know, to elect Sean Spiller, who is the NJEA president and a teacher. And I believe this would be maybe the only time in history, would have to check that, but that we would have a teacher in the governor's seat. And it may never happen again. So this is our chance to make that happen. One Democrat and one Republican candidate will be elected from this group in the primary to move on to the general election, which will take place in November. So everybody that you just watched in that video, one will come from the Democratic side, one will come from the Republican side. After the primary, they will do some more debating, and then November, we will vote on who the next governor is. Every vote counts. We cannot go backwards. And that's part of the reason why we showed you the history today, so you can see where we were and where we are today. Teaching shortages indirectly increases property taxes and affordability in New Jersey, as Sean Spiller mentioned in his message. When we can't find teachers, we have to provide them bonuses or hire them at higher steps on the salary guide, which in turn, who pays for that? Taxpayers pay for that. Property taxes go up because we have to pay for the more expensive salaries and bonuses and such. We wanted to thank you all for watching this little history lesson on pensions and the importance of pensions and what both Republicans and Democrats had to say. We appreciate you sticking around through the whole thing. If you're still here, thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody.